Hello, I have a ruler. I've noticed that I've got some scratchy audio. I don't know if it's the fabric on the shirt. So I'm just going to try and save myself that and be a bit more of my age demographic, but we use stupid things as microphone stands because we all use lapels because they're really cheap. I do have a better microphone, I just don't want to have to grab my laptop out. Anyway, how's it going? Today we're looking at the Ring series. All of them. Not all of them. Most of them. Almost most of them. I'll help break it down. I've got props and one hand, so this is going to be really interesting. Now, the obvious starting point, I'll be talking about the Ring series, the Japanese series, according to the Arrow video set. According as in, this comes with Ringu, Ringu 2, Ring 0 Birthday, it's the birthday one, and Spiral, which is the other second film. So we'll get into that. So we do also have the first American Ring film, which I have now watched twice. The second American Ring film, which I haven't watched yet. I will be watching it either today or, I don't know, before the end of this recording. You'll know, it will be in this video. There'll be a timestamp. If I'm not wrong, this is actually directed by the guy who directed the original one. So that's going to be interesting. And the one that's critically and regarded as the absolute worst thing to ever come out of anything, Rings. So, yeah, I'm actually really keen for that one. Because it's one of those things where the Ring series, they're pretty... I mean, look, I've just gone through the Ju-on the Grudge series, and given that all of those films are exactly the same, aside from Ju-on the Grudge 2. It's the only one that has basically completely original stories, despite being still done by the same writer-director of the original ones. Because if you've seen that video, you'll know that the same guy did like 6 of the same movies, including like 2 of the American ones. Shockingly. But that also included the third American one, which he didn't do, and the 2 Japanese ones that came out in 2009. Nothing past 2009. This video will only be including these Ring films. So no, I will not be breaking off into the Spiral universe where they have like Sadako 3D and Sadako 3D 2, as well as there's also Sadako versus Kayako, which I will be reviewing in this video because I didn't talk about it in my Ju-on the Grudge video, because I had basically already made that video before I watched the film, and I think it's worth talking about in this one, very briefly, but I will be mentioning it. It's not great, but we'll talk about it. I watched it on YouTube, I should note, and the subtitles weren't completely accurate, so my viewing experience wasn't the best, but it was informative. Right, Sadako 3D and Sadako 3D 2 are a sequel to Spiral, and Sadako DX, which came out like last year, are sequels, I think, to the original series. Again, I'm not going to bother with that. That just seems like a cheap, we're going to keep making these films. Much like the Ju-on the Grudge films, they did a bunch of Japanese ones in the mid to late 2010s. It was, I think, a 2 to 3 parter. I couldn't be bothered searching them down, so, you know. But if you've seen that video, you'll know. So let's talk about Ringu. This is the second time I've actually watched it, because I bought the Arrow Video Steelbook a few years back, before they had released the set. And honestly, I loved it. I gave it like 5 stars on my initial viewing. I had originally said, this is back in 2019, now that's a scary film, and hot damn is that one hell of an ending. You know, original takes. I'm so good at original takes. Cut to 4 years later. It's 2023. The world has ended and it's come back to life again. I don't know why. They just decided to reboot it. It's like End of Evangelion, except not fun. I decided to rewatch all of these films after doing the Ju-on the Grudge films, because, you know what, I haven't watched any of the Ring films except for Ringu and The Ring. And here we are. So, Ringu is a 1998 film directed by Hideo Nakata. Nakata, I don't know Japanese names, it's not my forte. My review, I emphasize the word copy. I think it's a really interesting word. Mostly because none of these films are really a copy of themselves, which I find really gratifying, except for obviously the American Ring film, which has to be a copy of the original to be something else, and to also exist in an American Western market. Though I still think Ringu is an effective mystery, its horror wanes on rewatch, but is definitely effective on first watch. There were smaller things I noticed this time around that I hadn't the first time, mostly the nod to the plus symbol later in the film. It's funny to me how the fear of the protagonist's death is lessened on rewatch. And I gotta be honest, I think the American remake is a little better, but again, I'll rewatch that soon, because I'm quoting my review here. So, I gave it 4 stars on my second watch. I don't think it's a masterpiece like it had originally. I think just the experience of it was kind of really unique. I think because I hadn't really experienced too many J-horrors when I first watched Ringu, it really had a great impact on me, and I absolutely loved it. The thing is, this time around, not so much. And to be fair, I still will note, these all have great transfers. This is a 4K restoration, whereas the other 3 films are just standard high-definition transfers. But they all look really nice. So it's good special features. This set is really good. I just wanted to mention that. Get that out of the way. Good Arrow Video set. Much like the Jew on the Grudge set, except that one has a 4K UHD. What can I say about Ringu that hasn't already been said? Obviously, it inspired a change. It changed, like, the face of Japanese cinema, especially Japanese horror cinema. It brought a lot of adaptations from, the east to the west. A lot of horror films that would come out in the next couple of years would be adapted into the US. As I've seen with the Grudge films, with the Ring films. What was that other one? I think Pulse as well, which I think was done by the same director as Ringu. Nevertheless, I won't go into plot for these films because the first one, it's a pretty simple plot. Again, the basic opening, cold open with these 2 girls hanging out. Turns out one of them's heard about this video where if you watch it, you'll die in 7 days, and the other one has watched the same video. And she, of course, proceeds to be killed by Sadako. I will note that the American version is called Samara. And it's still interesting. I don't think it's as scary on a second watch, especially. And the mystery is still quite interesting. Like, it's still nicely done. Procedural elements are really well done. If you like the kind of procedural horror, or even just procedural drama that's kind of bookended by horror scenes, then yes, this is pretty good. The thing is, though, is that, again, on rewatch, knowing, because the main character survives at the end, knowing that the way to beat the curse is to copy the tape and show it to someone else, and that for them to beat the curse is to copy the tape and show it to someone else, hence to pass on the curse, that's the only way to beat it. When she does it in the film, it kind of ruins the effect to a degree. But the thing is, though, is that the American one and the Japanese one kind of do it in the same way, but I think I realized what was better about it in the American one. Basically, from the looks of it, I can't even remember if this happened in the Japanese one. If you remember, do correct me. But the way she's able to, cure herself of the curse is by copying the tape and giving it to her, ex-husband, I think? Just ex-partner. And so he gets the curse and she doesn't. It's passed on. The thing is, I can't remember if that's exactly how it happens in the Japanese one, if that's how it passes on the curse. So early on, the curse is passed on, but there's nothing for, the tension kind of goes out the window. That's when the tension went out the window for me, because I realized, she's like passed on the curse immediately. But I'm pretty sure she just shows him the video, the original, and then makes him a copy. But I can't remember. Either way, the curse is either passed on through her giving it to her partner, or her ex-partner, or the fact that she gives it to a kid, because the kid watches the copy. And I'm pretty sure that's actually how it's passed on, because she does make a copy to give to her ex-partner. He looks through it, whatever. She gets it back. Her kid ends up watching it. So unfortunately, the plot on Wikipedia doesn't actually emphasize whether or not the kid watches the tape. The kid watches the copy of the tape, which is really, really annoying. But nevertheless, it was a lot more obvious in the American version. And I kind of prefer it in the American version. There's a lot of this movie I prefer in the American version, which is very weird to me, because I thought that I preferred this version initially, because I watched them like a week or so apart when I initially watched them, and it's just bizarre to me, isn't it? Maybe not a week apart, maybe a few months apart, but still. You get Sadako. Sadako is the more interesting part of the film, to some degree. The problem is that, and this is where it becomes interesting for the sequels, is the lack of Sadako. Sadako is not really in the film. The scary part upon initial watch is Not really that she's lurking around corners or whatever, but the fact that, the main character is due to die in 7 days, of course, knowing the fact that she passes on the curse either to her son or to the ex-husband. Either way, she passes on the curse, and it kind of like flatlines the film for me on rewatch. Like, again, first watch, easy peasy, but second watch, not really. So, it's a bit disappointing for me. But I still really like the film. It's just one of those things where the tension just kind of goes. And for me, that's kind of concerning. Because then I'm just kind of sitting there waiting for that final scene. Not really even final scene, second to last scene. I guess it's the final scene before the epilogue to some degree. Where the ex-husband is, killed by Sadako. And to be fair, it's still a pretty terrifying scene, and I think it's a more effective usage of Sadako. Climbs out of the TV, all bendy and whatnot, and then, of course, when she turns around the corner and she looks at him, it emphasizes her evil eye, and he dies. It doesn't show like much of her face, it just shows her eye, and like that all she needs to do is basically look at a person directly, and it invokes this fear that kills people immediately. Which is great. It's a really effective way to kill someone. It's a very effective scare. But that's really all I can say about Ringu. I really want to compare it to The Ring, right the hell now. I guess I could. I could just do this one and be like, let's talk about The Ring. Because then we can talk about the sequels of each. Okay, let's talk about The Ring. So, The Ring is a 2002 film. It's directed by Gore Verbinski, which I really like Gore Verbinski's work. Not all of them, but the majority of them. He's got a nice style and approach to his horror cinema, to basically his action cinema as well. And in all honesty, I don't really fault this film very much. I actually gave it 4.5 stars upon second watch. My initial watch, I didn't praise it so highly. I think I gave it probably 4 stars on my initial watch, if we're going to be honest. It's also almost 2 hours long, whereas the initial one isn't as long. It's 90 to 95 minutes. Most of them are about 90 minutes to 100 minutes. The American one is longer. I kind of don't mind that. It adds for added sequences to make it scarier. So I watched it initially in September of 2020. So that was basically a year after my watch of Ringu. And I said, this didn't feel as powerful as the Japanese version, however it does do a lot of things right as its own copy of the original. So I still praised it, I gave it 4 stars. But then on rewatch, 2023, I gave it 4.5 stars, which seems kind of barbaric. I've basically swapped out the reviews. My only minus for the half star, it's mostly about Samara, but we'll get into that. Holy shit, it's uncanny how this had the opposite effect to my rewatch of Ringu. And so far that's a good thing. Where Ringu's original impact for me was its slow burn horror with the pressing idea that Sadako was going to kill the protagonist after 7 days, it becomes a tense mystery that has a terrifying reveal of Sadako at the end. However, on rewatch that felt flat, given that I'd seen it before and the terror of the protagonist's imminent doom goes away because, she cures herself of the curse very early on. There are no long-lasting effects on her, either psychological or physical outside of the mark on her arm, and none of these really help to add extra horror along, the journey of the film, as it's very procedural in its telling of the story. Its focus is horror at the start, horror at the end, in between a air of tension, but mostly just procedural, finding stuff. I guess the horror also comes from what happened to Sadako, her being killed and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that is emphasized, and that's horrific content, sure, but I guess I don't find that as scary, realistically. Cut to The Ring, a film that uses a tight cast, a good cinematographer, and an amazing director to give you a film that is creepy and tense throughout, whilst adding other forms of scares to keep the psychological horror alive. The nightmares, the horses, that kind of... a lot of imagery, a lot of interesting scenes. None of the extra scares, as in the ones that aren't Samara killing a person, seem cheap or act as jump scares to get you through to the end. They're instead used to build the story and overall dread of Samara. If this is scary, then Samara is going to be terrifying. That type of thought process. The visuals, both horror-wise and the general cinematography, give an air of terror throughout that you don't get in Ringu. It's such a nice film to look at. Yes, even with the... color grading. And there's a lot of motifs and visuals that repeat in the film. The tree, water, rings. The original one has motifs. They're just not as... They're not as prominent, I don't think. There's the plus and minus one that I did note that I found interesting, but none of it really seemed like something that's great to look at on second watch. Like something that's like... It doesn't seem as emphasized, you know? It's kind of more subtle, which I guess is a more Japanese kind of style. Subtlety over extravagance. I don't mind that they change the story in small parts compared to the Japanese release as well. I like that the mother can't have a child story over the mother has abilities and her daughter has them tenfold. Because that's kind of the point of Ringu. Like, the scary part is like, the scary part. The reason Sadako is so fearful, is so terrifying, is because she has these psychic abilities that her mother did have, but her mother didn't have in such a powerful way. But also they emphasize the fact that they don't really know who her father was, and that it's possible that her father could have been a supernatural being. That, I guess it's implied that it might be the devil. I guess they don't really stipulate, but basically that's like the gist that I got from it. Like, oh yeah, so her father, not this doctor psychologist guy who's taking care of them and basically abusing them. It might be the devil that gave her a child, and that's Sadako, and she's like the evil incarnate. So they really emphasize the supernatural stuff in that, which is fine because they emphasize it through the mother as well, as in like it's a biological hereditary thing, but it doesn't really have as much of an effect. This one seems a lot more dramatic in The Ring, where it's like it's a husband and wife that want to have a kid, and as it is, they don't really stipulate in the American one that the wife has psychic abilities or anything. She just seems like a standout person, like a nice person, she's in these community clubs, she's always wanted to have a kid, and that's kind of been like the downfall of her life because she's like incapable of having one, and suddenly they go on holiday and they come back and they've got a kid. Wow, I wonder how that happened. And they don't really emphasize that either. They're not really like, they emphasize to some degree that she's probably adopted, but also they don't emphasize her lineage. They're like, Samara, it doesn't matter who the hell her parents are. It's like kind of the point that instead of her being terrifying because she was raised raised in a terrifying way, it's the same as the Japanese one where she's kind of just born evil, and I kind of like that still. I like how that still translates over in both versions, except instead of blaming the mother in the American one, they kind of just... Well, they don't really blame the mother in the Japanese one, they just kind of emphasize that the mother is also at fault a little bit. But mostly it might be the father, who we don't know who that is. We never find out. There's a different commentary here about parenthood and how even with the perfect caring family, a person can just be something else from birth, from initial design. I do think that Sadako has a more terrifying presence in the original, but that is mostly due to her movement and the eye. Her face in this one isn't as creepy though I do love the added effect of her spirit acting in this version as a video projection, with the added Americanized ghost trope of appearing and disappearing, then reappearing but closer, though to better effect than most other ghost films I've seen. Because they use it once, she crawls out of the TV, she's standing up, suddenly she flickers forward, the guy falls back into the shelf, and she doesn't really do that anymore, because she doesn't need to, But I don't like the reveal of when it cuts to her face, and it's like, scary girl. And then it like zooms into her eye, and she's got like this white eye, and now he's dead. It's like, that doesn't do it for me as well as the Japanese one does. I don't need to see her whole face. I don't think that's terrifying. I like the fact that you can't see her face the whole time, and then when they show it, it's just like... It just looks like a girl with like makeup on. But like ugly looking makeup to make her look ugly, like witch-like. Like demon-like. It doesn't work for me. It's the least impactful part of the whole film. Like, the whole effect of Samara being able to like just come out of the TV and be like this projection, but also be a physical entity in presence because she's dripping water, which I really like how they set that up in the start of the film, and they have it later in the middle of a dream sequence as well, that like there's this water everywhere, and it's like, oh yeah, Sadako's here because there's water, because she's been in a well. The Ring feels like a nicely realized film, where they've looked at the original and changed it in small places, but mostly to make the story and style work. It's not glorified in any Americanized way, rather, and dare I say it, improved upon with someone else's vision. The scene of Rachel looking at her neighbors in the skyrise alone is just a well-realized visual when you see their TVs and how this curse could be placed upon any of them given the wrong tape. That's my main interpretation. That's like the main thing where you look at it and everyone's got the comfort of the TV, but of course there's such a subtextual thing there as well of like this level of modern technology, this reliance on this stuff to give us comfort, like the YouTube video you're watching now, like the TV I've got off to the side there, that I've been watching these films through. Something that's a commodity in our lives, much like the screen I'm reading off of just for my Letterboxd review. It's an interesting take, but again, I just like that. I like that about it. It works in its Americanized subtext, It's a good contextual thing. I like that. It's just nice. The curse feels like an inevitability in this film, despite still being taped by pure chance, much like in the original, because Samara is always looking for a way to spread her curse. And I know the tape is more graphic in this one, like as in when they watch it, there's a lot more terrifying visuals, I guess, because Saw had come out and they're like, hey, what if we have some awful body horror? Awful as in like, because it's scary, not because it's bad. It has emphasized visuals, and I kind of like that. The original tape never, like the Japanese one, never really scared me. It's fine. It's still good, but this one seems a lot more impactful. A lot of people on Letterboxd are like, oh, if I had to watch an avant-garde, student film, I'd be scared too. I don't know, but that's even what they commented the film. It just looks like a student film. Sure, if you have that kind of budget to put a nail through your finger. And I love how Samara is drenched in water when she's out of the TV. It's just a great added effect. Now, in terms of ranking-wise, I do actually currently have The Ring as my favourite, followed by Ringu. Because I did this in watch order, I'm going to talk about Ringu 2 first, so I'm going to just jump back a little. Ringu 2, or Ring 2, is directed by Hideo Nakata. It was made in 2000. Well, it was released in 1999 because it's a year later, and Spiral didn't do well critically or financially, so they just kind of redid it. They're like, let's just do the sequel all over again. Now, I gave it 3.5 stars. I actually quite liked it, because I think for one part, I've liked all of these sequels, weirdly. Like, unlike the Jew and the Grudge films, where they're all the same movie, basically, these ones are all different, and I do give some respect to that. I hope y'all don't want to watch the first film all over again, but with a different cast, because this isn't that. Which I expected it to be. I expected it to be the exact same movie as the first one, just worse, but it isn't. It's still not better, but it's different at least. It's funny how, by the looks of it, Ringu 2 and Ringu 0 are the only Sadako films where it's not really about the videotape curse. Sure, the curse still appears in the film and takes some victims, but not to the extent of the first film, especially given we never actually see Sadako outside of a flashback to the first film from someone else's perspective, and a kind of reanimated corpse thing near the end. Basically, the girl in the opening of the first film who was killed, her best friend witnessed Sadako killing her, and that has traumatized her, but also has given her psychic abilities that allow her to basically project the tape onto a TV. Which is really interesting, because it basically means that everyone there in that room might be cursed. They don't really go into it too far, but at the same time, I think it's just giving you the idea rather than giving you the actual actions. I don't know. Ringu 2 takes the approach of what happens immediately after the events of the first film and how it affected everyone. From Sadako's curse extending to Yuichi, the main character's child, and the friend of the first victim in the first film, who can project the curse onto a TV of her mind, as in project the videotape. This film doesn't go too in-depth on explaining films. Instead, it leans into a surreal atmosphere that the first film rarely even delved into outside of the concept like a curse and Sadako's method of killing. Because the surrealism is still there in the first one, but it's basically just a regular supernatural kind of surrealism, stuff that's very basic. Again, a curse, how the curse affects people, and the fact that she can climb out of a TV. That's like the most surreal part of the film, realistically, but still. I don't think this film is as compelling or scary, but I think it hits on the original ideas, even if some of it is a bit too thin. The main story is interesting, but there's a subplot that basically starts and ends the film that feels tacked on, as if they only exist to create two scary scenes. Scenes that are basically cheap imitations of the more iconic scares from the first film. This doesn't feel like a wasted idea of a sequel. It builds on what we've seen before, and despite retelling some stuff, just in case you forgot from the previous film, it's mostly just new ideas to extend the horror from the first film. There were some really nice sequences, like the hotel where the tape was shot, and the well towards the end. I gotta be honest, I don't remember most of this film now, because it's like Spiral and Ringu 2 I watched 2 days apart, and I don't remember, actually, I'm pretty sure I watched them a week apart, but still, I'm like, I don't remember what happens I don't remember all the intimate details of what happens in the Ring 2. I know it's about the husband's assistant. No, it's about a doctor. What the fuck? No, that's Spiral. This one's about the assistant, who was technically his girlfriend, and she investigates the tape, and she works with a scientist journalist to investigate it as well. There's a part with a journalist who worked for the girl from the first film, because they're looking for the girl from the first film. They end up finding her and her kid, and the kid's kind of possessed. The dad had died at the start of the film. They don't show it, because it's emphasized at the end of the previous film that like they're going to go to her dad's place and give him the curse, and he's going to die, because it's like, I don't know, I guess we've got to kill someone we know who won't spread the curse even further. God, it's distracting trying to remember what happens in the plot of this movie, so let's just keep reading. Creepy, sure, but I think I'll be able to sleep tonight with the lights off. Gooey, rotten Sadako doesn't pull off as much as an effect as the real deal. Again, she doesn't really appear too much in the flesh in this one, but literally in the flesh, I guess. Is this the one where they rebuild her face? No, that must be in the Spiral. I'm getting myself really confused. It's kind of distracting watching two different versions of like the same film a week apart. I probably should have filmed this review between each, because my god. If not for the irrelevant stuff that's basically related to the cursed tape and the reporter, because it feels like they needed to have the cursed tape still in the film just to be like, hey, remember the first film how to have the cursed tape? We're going to still do that, but not really that much. I think this film is actually pretty interesting. It clearly wants to be something different and surreal, to the point of having its lead be a medium, but basically because of how iconic the tape was, all that stuff still had to be included. And by that I mean the schoolgirl giving the reporter a copy of the tape and her expecting him to watch it so she isn't cursed anymore. There's no urgency to time like in the original film, so that when that girl's death, the schoolgirl's death, comes up, I was surprised that a week had passed in the film. If that subplot was removed, the film would feel stronger in its core story, and I wouldn't leave the film scratching my head over that last scene. Basically, I'm not even going to go into it. It doesn't matter. They just try to pull off one last jump scare in the film. It's very weird. The girl projecting the tape with her mind was cool, though. That's all the tape stuff I needed, because that by itself is very interesting. I did like the second one. It's a lot different in its storytelling, because again, it really wants to emphasize the effect that each character has felt and has been impacted by this curse, rather than the curse itself, So, to some degree, I like its story more, and I like how it goes into a really surreal ending, because again, the main character, Mai, who's again the assistant ex-girlfriend of the husband from the first film who died, she's, how do I put it this way, a medium, and Yoichi, the kid from the first film, also has psychic abilities and is semi-possessed by Sadako, like she's trying to use him as a vessel. That really becomes a thing. It's interesting, I guess, especially because it becomes a study of his character and trying to see if they can kill or resurrect Sadako, and they kind of try to resurrect her before Mai is able to use her abilities to stop Sadako and save the kid. That's the end of the movie, kind of, but it's also the way they do it is really insane. They're in a swimming pool, and it becomes this whole surreal thing of they fall in the water and suddenly they're in a well, and they got to fight off Sadako, but she's actually kind of nice. I don't know. It's fucking weird. All right, let's move on. I think it's an interesting film. Again, none of these are masterpieces in terms of the sequels, but I do think it's interesting. Nevertheless, let's jump to Spiral. Spiral is also known as Rasen, as in Rasen. I gave it 3 stars. Now, Spiral's an interesting one because Spiral was released on the exact same day, which is uncanny. Mostly because, and my mate actually keeps thinking that the only reason it came out on the same day was because it's a sequel to the original Ring film, which came out in '95. It's not. This is a direct sequel to, Ringu, because it has the exact same cast. Like, literally no one has changed. In fact, because I watched Ringu 2, and then I watched Spiral, and I noticed, I'm like, there is a delineation where you could watch both of these two and they could be in the same universe, but then there's a key point where they both spread off in different directions. And honestly, I don't mind that. Just when you thought Sadako was scary, now she's being sexualized. Spiral, the bad timeline sequel to Ringu, features a direct continuation with a arguably more terrifying outcome than Ringu 2, if you can swallow its surreal load. Though mentioned in this review, so I actually highlighted the review that I thought was really interesting, which it basically was just talking about the chronology of when it came out and whatever, because there's a lot. I think she says in this one, this is Biscoito 18, says it means that Rasen has its own timeline within the series, which consists of Ringu, Rasen, Sadako 3D, and Sadako 3D 2. So it has its own series, which is really interesting. But I've heard that the Sadako 3D and 3D 2 are not very good, so it's because Ringu 2 basically ends the series. So then when you've got Sadako 3D and Sadako 3D 2, they clearly were like, let's go back to Spiral, or Rasen, and do a sequel to that, because that actually has an open ending, basically. I will reiterate that this film came out the same year as Ringu, and is a faithful adaptation of the second book with 2 sequels of its own. The film is scary in the way that Ringu 2 is, in which they're not that scary with jump scares or just Sadako creeping towards victims, but focusing their horror through more obscure surreal aspects like psychic abilities and possession and alternate ways to continue Sadako's curse. I do prefer Ringu 2, but I like the direction of this film and its effects. However, I don't like how Sadako's face is shown in full, and it kind of ruins her ability to be scary. I say that despite the fact that Ringu 3, or Ringu 0, just shows her full out, because it's about her, it's a backstory video, film, whatever, still. The long hair over her face is scary for a reason. The 7 days till death is scary. The idea that reading a book that will give you a deadly cough is not as terrifying even in the post-COVID world. They're both strange sequels, but they do their best to expand the horizons of Sadako's fear. And I like that even if one feels better executed than the other, I still think they're both worth watching. With this film being the bad ending, and Ringu 2 being the good ending, as in they defeat Sadako in Ringu 2, in Rasen, Spiral, they don't. I'll be honest, the story is a lot more... I feel like it's a lot more memorable in Spiral, to the point that I'd forgotten what happened in Ring 2, except for basically the ending, because most of it's just it just feels like a lot of ideas thrown in the air, and the main story being about Mai trying to, as in MAI, trying to basically rescue the kid from Sadako's curse. It's not as interesting. Again, it's very surreal, and I like that. It does something different, and I like that. But in the story of Spiral is a lot kind of more concise. It only loses itself in the ending, which is where I think its weakest point is. The film, and a lot of people don't like this Spiral anyway, because they think it's it's too slow burn. It's too little amount of ideas in the start, and then there's too many ideas in the end. And it's basically a film about the father dying, the ex-husband, because they try to emphasize that there's the curse is becoming a virus, so that they do an autopsy, because again the main character is a doctor. It's the guy who looks at bodies for autopsies, cuts them open when they're dead. And they discover that there was something wrong with the guy's heart. There was a virus or something in there. Nevertheless, that wasn't the same as all the other people who had died from Sadako, as if there was she was able to, after you watch the curse, make this thing kind of grow in your heart, and then it would kill you the moment you see her. It's like an activation key, So, like, she's the activation key to a device that needs to be unlocked to kill you. That kind of deal. If that makes it sound any bloody easier. Because of that, it's mostly a story about the Doctor, but Mai's also there. But then they get into a relationship, and the Doctor reads the diary that the mother had written. She'd written the diary about the events of the first film, basically. And because of that, he found it from a guy because that guy was already coughing and seemed really sick. That guy had gotten the virus as it was from reading the diary. So Sadako's curse had gone into the diary and basically passed on as a virus into this guy, which made him, like, cough himself to death, basically. Hence why I said they're coughing yourself to death from reading a book. The thing is that the only other person who gets that cough is another scientist who reads the book, and he also gets the cough, and because he realized that it has a different virus that's still again spawned from the curse of Sadako. And, you know, he wonders why the main character, the Doctor, doesn't have it. And what the Doctor realizes is that he doesn't have it anymore because he passed it on through sex to Mai. Basically, he gave her the virus because there's different ways to pass on the virus now. You watch the tape, you read the book. It depends on... The tape, the only way to pass it on is to copy it and give it to someone else. The book, the only way to pass on the virus you get from that is to pass it on through sex, which is very specific. The thing is, it gets passed on to her, she gets pregnant, and then she dies. And she dies in a place that looks like a well. But then she appears later, but she's already appeared earlier, as a version of herself, as if like a doppelganger that's mostly, like, it's her body, but it's now, it's a vessel for Sadako. And the baby was her. She gave birth to herself in the form with, like, as an empty shell for Sadako. It's very weird. It kind of feels rushed, but it's also like, what the hell? And that's not even the weirdest part. Because then she's like, hey, I can bring everyone back if you have DNA. Because this guy wants to kill himself at the start of this film, this Doctor, because he lost his son. So she's like, because you have given me the ability to, you know, exist, and we're going to publish the girl's journal so that everyone will read it and they will all get cursed and, you know, pass on the curse over and over and over again. It becomes a question of, what does he get out of it? She's like, you know, he's like, I could stop you. I could, you know, stop you from doing this and, you know, you wouldn't be able to survive and whatever. Stop the curse. And she's like, yes, but we could give you an alternative where we can recreate your son using my body. So, not to mention that, to the exact age he was when he died, because he happens to have a strand of hair of his from when the kid died, and he has his own DNA, so they recreate his son and give him a happy ending with his son, even though he knows that Mai, who's now Sadako, will spread her curse. The thing is, Sadako as Mai as Sadako, brings back the husband from the first film, so her boyfriend, who had died. So he's just back. He's just alive again. It's very weird. She's just somehow brought him back from the dead. And now they're just gonna go and spread fear and spread Sadako's curse through the book and through the tape, I don't know, and other stuff. And that's how the movie ends. That's why I think it's a lot more interesting. I don't think it's a better film than Ringu 2, but it definitely seems a bit more interesting to that degree. Again, they're not as scary as, you know, Ringu. Because Ringu's fear factor isn't really from the fact that it's a virus that spreads. It's more of the fact that it's a ghost woman who wants to kill you who was buried in a well. You know? Also the fact that both of them have different reasons for how Sadako was alive. The Ringu 2 version is like, oh, she survived for 30 years in that well and only just died like a year or so ago. Like, because it's been 30 years since she was put into the well and she had only like just died. I don't know why that's a thing, but it is a thing. I think it's Spiral or it's the opposite where she died immediately and they were able to find her. I think it is Ringu 2 where they recreate her body in Ringu 2. And, like, I'm pretty sure it's that one. One of the two. I can't remember which one, which is very annoying to me. I'm pretty sure it's Ringu too. They use her skull and try to make a mold to identify her face. And when they're taking pictures of it, it's kind of becoming alive. And then they just don't do that anymore. They're like, as if they're like too scared. They're like, okay, you can take the body now, bye. So that doesn't really become much in the second one. But, yeah. So that's the confusing parts of both of these two films. Again, Spiral is more memorable to me because it's less convoluted, probably because a lot less happens in a lot more time. But the ending is really just bizarre and very incomprehensible to some degree. It just is like, you just kind of gotta let it fly that they can just do this. And then we get to Ringu Zero, which is, I gotta be honest, my preferred one of the sequels. God, I forgot I have to talk about Sadako versus Kayako. So, Ringu Zero is a 2000 film directed by Norio Tsuruta. It's 99 minutes long. I give it 3.5 stars because, weirdly, I mean, I do prefer it to Ringu 2. I prefer it to any of the sequels so far. And that kind of seems like a weird choice because this is the one that most people really dislike, because it's like, oh, it's the obligatory, we've run out of ideas, let's just give her a backstory thing. And they mention in Ringu 2 that she was a part of a theatre troupe. This one is her in a theatre troupe. So let's break it down, because I have a lot to talk about this one. So, you don't understand, you don't understand, it's Carrie, but instead of having telekinesis, her twin-like entity does. My basic thoughts on this one is, if you've seen the movie Carrie, you've seen this movie. Except this one, she doesn't have telekinetic powers. It's her evil twin ghost spirit version of herself does. We'll get into it. In terms of a backstory prequel film, this isn't the best. Relatively generic to some degree, but I still found it compelling to watch as a Carrie-inspired drama. Or blatant ripoff, depending on who you're asking. It's not over the top in explaining the tape or her attachment to the to TV, despite there being one in her evil self's room, which seems more like a nod to rather than an explanation. However, it's also not a Sadako kills a bunch of people, but it's in the late 60s kind of film. It's a drama about a girl who's a social outcast, even in the group of traditionally social outcasts. You know, the theatre group. So, if you're expecting a crazy original backstory or something deeply traumatic, this isn't it. However, it is a pretty compelling drama with nicely orchestrated scenes. The premiere of the play being a highlight, and Sadako's later rampage as well. So, the last half an hour of this film is really good. The early half an hour, if you don't like character drama, it's cliche, you might not like it. I enjoyed it because it was something different, and I was also reminded a lot of Carrie, and I'm like, I kind of like that. Sometimes I like when a film is basically a ripoff of another film. My main issues are with the story, as the reporter is introduced as if the events of the film have already happened, but then she's suddenly in the story. Just one scene in particular with a doctor that makes it seem like an error, but I think that twist was that someone hired the reporter to investigate Sadako and was feeding her information about the play from behind the scenes. So basically the story divides in two, where you're looking at Sadako in this play, and then you're looking at this reporter who's investigating her. The thing is, which I didn't realize until I kind of looked it up on Wikipedia, the reporter is the daughter of one of the reporters from, the events of the prologue in the first film. The flashback in the first film. So how they were like, this is this audio recording of these people seeing Sadako's mother's abilities, and then someone calling her out as a hack and a fraud, and then Sadako, being behind the scenes there, kills him. I think that was him. That was the guy who, this is his daughter, who's now a grown-up reporter. And it seems like she's discovered where Sadako is because someone, I think it's one of the girls from the, it's definitely one of the girls from the play, has been telling her, hey, I know where this Sadako girl is. Can you find information on her, because she seems kind of sus. She's quiet, but she's also the understudy for the main person in the play. And so she does a lot of, investigating, finding out who she is, where she comes from, that kind of stuff, and how she might have certain abilities, because it's clearly been researched beforehand, but all the doctors who reported on it have either died or aren't telling anyone any secrets. It's a bit convoluted, because they still kind of want to have that investigative part of the plot, but then also have the drama side with Sadako. The investigation part isn't very interesting. It basically just fills in a bit more backstory, but for the most part, it doesn't really do much, because the main question still remains is, who is Sadako's father? And they don't explain it. They don't tell you. It doesn't really matter, I guess, but it's also like, we don't really want to say that her father's like the devil, but we also don't really want to say that the psychologist who was taking care of her and her mother is her father. Like, he kind of says that he is, because she asks at the end of the film, like, are you my father? And he's like, of course, who else would be? And it's like, yeah, I don't believe him. It's very weird. Anyway, so that was the part I got lost in. I didn't know if the part of the reporter was happening after like all these events, like as in she's discovering these events and you're discovering it with her through flashbacks. But you know more as an audience until she knows it all. But the thing is, she then goes to the play and sees it all happen, so she's there in that timeline. It's happening at the same time that someone just happens to be investigating her. Sadako at the same time as we're watching these events. So, yeah. There is a good scene, though, where, they find out that she's cursed and all the people in the theater group are cursed, and the reporter and the guy who's taking photos, like, they're in his red room, whatever, dark room. They look at all these photos and they realize that they aren't cursed, but all these people are. And he's like, we can't publish this because this is clearly a curse. We can't publish it. And she's like, I was never intending to publish it. So clearly this is her being like, yeah, I'm here for revenge. I'm not here to tell other people about Sadako, because I want this girl dead. Clearly. There's a part near the end, because plot-wise, again, it's basically just, we witness as they learn to do this play, the main girl dies, as in the main actress there dies. Sadako becomes her replacement, and she becomes familiar with the director, then the director dies, and then it's opening night, and in the meantime, this investigative journalist has been investigating all this stuff, and basically goes to the show The Killer. And that last act, again, is really interesting, because it starts with the end of the play and its broadcast. You know that the director is dead and he's somewhere on that set, but they haven't shown him yet. He was killed by her boyfriend, basically. Sadako's boyfriend. I say boyfriend because it's love interest, realistically. They're not really in a relationship at all, it's just a love interest. Because it's that kind of thing of like, oh, he's the guy who falls for her, and she falls for him, and she trusts him, and then she kills him. As you expect it, basically. But he ends up killing the director, because the director tries killing her, because he's like, I know you're evil, I'm going to kill you, and then, he tries to abuse her for her potentially evilness, because that's what you do. And so she rejects him. He's like, I'm gonna kill you then, and then the lover comes in and kills him. Anyway, almost accidentally, but definitely on purpose. It's like just an act of defense. It doesn't really villainize the love interest, but still. So then the play happens, and again, it's interesting until the girl who was feeding the reporter all the information, goes into the booth and plays this audio, which is the audio from the recording with Sadako's mother, where they revealed Sadako's mother to be a fraud, even though she wasn't. And then Sadako, of course, killed that journalist. And Sadako is remembering all this because she'd forgotten it, because that was her evil self, which isn't part of her anymore. She's the innocent, good person now, which is a choice to separate them. We'll get into it. That's where it becomes the main Carrie thing, where it's like the pig's blood on Carrie's head. This is the recording of her killing a guy, and she goes insane. Another guy tries to accuse her, and then she kills that person, but it's like not her, it's like the other version of her who's like secretly there, but not really. It's fucking weird. It's like a spirit form of her who's just like always like attached to her. Nevertheless, they have to escape, because everyone runs away because the place is like going to hell, whatever. The theater troupe, chase her backstage into the dressing room, and they kill her. And then the reporter comes in, she's like, we're not done yet, we got to kill the other one. So they bring the body to the house that is where the evil Sadako is, which is where the psychologist father figure is. And, you know, the reporter goes upstairs to kill the evil Sadako, finds an empty room with a TV in it, and the doctor comes in and he's like, wait, did you guys bring Sadako's body here? And then they realize that, yes, they did. So they go outside and Sadako has woken up and is running away with the boyfriend, like the love interest. And the other girl who was feeding them the information, whatever, is now feeling really guilty and is like telling the others not to go and chase her or whatever, that she should be free. We've already tried killing her once. This is bad. We've clearly turned the wrong shoe kind of deal. They chase her into the woods, and then she basically becomes more and more possessed by Sadako to the point of she almost jumps off a cliff. The younger Sadako kind of grabs around her. You don't see her, you just see her from behind because the love interest is like there trying to talk to Sadako, and he's like, come with me, we can go, we can be free, whatever. And she's like got her back turned to this cliff, to this ocean, and she's like, no, it's too late. Sadako combines with the other Sadako. It's not as interesting as it sounds. She's got her arms, the kid arms around Sadako, because the father says, I was able to separate them, and then I used drugs to make sure that she remained a kid, which is really fucking dumb. I don't understand that at all. And then, of course, they merge, and Sadako kills the love interest, and then she goes chasing all the people through the woods. And it's really interesting. It's like a force, like it's like a wave that like knocks out one person. They go like and then they die. And there's another person, and they're all like in shock, as if like the curse is finally killing them one by one, like literally like ducks in a row. The reporter's there. She runs away. She finds the other girl who had confessed the information to her, whatever, who was trying to ruin Sadako. And when they're running away, you can see like Sadako in the background in the woods, which is a great visual. It's really creepy. It's a good effect that I really liked about it, because it's what I wanted from like the previous two movies, where they're like, oh, let's use Sadako and make her scary again. And this one does. You give a whole innocent side to her. It's a compelling story. I find her to be a really interesting character. Again, instead of it making her pure evil, it's like there are two versions of her. There are two entities. One's pure good, one's pure evil, because despite her being evil at birth, she was separated, and now it's two versions. It's the classic basket case, malignant situation, except instead of them being physical entities, one's physical, one's spiritual, but the spiritual becomes a physical kind of form. As a kid, they don't really emphasize it too much. They merge. It doesn't matter. They become physical again. And this is the part that I found a little bit tricky, because suddenly we've got our reporter and the girl inside the house, and the reporter sees Sadako outside. She goes to run to the door. Sadako's suddenly inside, and then she's around this corner. The reporter runs back and falls to the floor with this girl. They're both crying because they both know they're going to die. And Sadako, like, you're waiting for Sadako, like you're watching the corner, you're waiting for her to pop around the corner, like just creepily come around like a Dementor or whatever. Instead, she just kind of jumps, and she's like, boo. And then she like starts going like all wavy, and like you hear all of these bones crack and stuff as she comes towards them, and it's just like really cheap and cheesy. Like, it just looks really dumb, like as if the person who plays Sadako didn't see the original film to see how Sadako acted. They're like, oh well, she just does this, but there was never any how does she appear, because this isn't out of a TV, so she's not just lumping herself out of a TV, getting up and then creepily walking around. In this case, she just jumps as if that was meant to scare someone. But the thing is, the music has also been really emphasized. So this is the part, Sadako's here, be scared. It's just too much, and also too stupid. So like all the effect of it could be scary if she had creepily come around the corner. Like imagine you get a flat-lined corner and suddenly this black-haired figure slowly comes around and then slowly creeps towards them. Even if it did have the kind of creaking effects, it didn't really need to. If she was just moving like that, sure. I don't remember Ringu having creaking effects. Sure, the Ju-on films do, but I don't think the goddamn Ringu films do. So then, of course, she creeps towards them. The reporter, grabs her gun that she'd brought, And she kills herself and the girl. Well, the girl and herself, to save them from being killed by Sadako's curse. The father figure guy finds Sadako, finds the two girls with some really interesting blood work to show they've been killed, which is really interesting. And he takes her, back to the main room of the place or whatever, where it does show some images of like the whole splitting of spirit and body kind of deal. So it'd be like, yeah, he kind of knows what he's doing. Like, he obviously, there's some research here that he just has lying about. Just a little bit of visual exposition. And he leads her out to a well, and of course he then slashes her on the top of the head, and she falls in, and then he closes it, and of course she is still alive, and she's just wakes up in the well. She's, I think she has a dream about the love interest, and then she wakes up and she's just in the well, and she's just screaming for him and just in there to die. I think that's based on the version where she'll be there for 30 years, and until the video gets taped, and she's able to put her evil energy into that, so, and then let her body die kind of deal. So, yeah, what else do I have to say about this film? Because that's basically the plot of the movie. Overall, it's a much more straightforward film than Ringu 2 and Spiral, but it's more compelling as a character drama over being a constant scarefest. It's almost as if they never were constant scarefests. Sadako in the Woods is a great visual. My only real story issue is how they split Sadako into two beings, one pure good, one pure evil, for the sake of having this style of plot. Instead of her being evil and pretending to be good, they chose an easier, more conventional story to allow Sadako to be more sympathetic, so we could root for her. I can imagine most fans didn't like this, given Sadako was always seen as pure evil, no matter what, and this film contradicts that, just for the sake of an easier plot. I still enjoyed it, but that's probably my main gripe with the whole entire characterization of Sadako. And then I guess we'll cover Sadako vs. Kayako, which is a 2016 film directed by Koji Shiraishi. Shiraishi. I gave it 2.5 stars. I watched it on YouTube. I didn't love it. It's, again, The Ring versus The Grudge. This is a film, a not-so-scary versus film, that takes its time to get the iconic ghost to fight, but the setup is 70% a Ring film and 30% a Ju-on film, and the result of the fight is probably not what you'd expected it to be. There's even the part where they leak the cursed video onto the internet and no one seems to care. That's I think part of the plot for the Rings film, but in this film it's it just happens and they don't do anything about it. However, the post-credits scare was interesting, even as this film is overall just fine. It's not particularly scary, but it attempts to summarize both the franchises. Right, the post-credits scare is they redo the tape, because they've done a version of the tape in this film that they show, and it's like a door that Sadako comes out from, but now she's merged with Kayako, so she's creeping around like Kayako, and then she runs up to the camera and screams or whatever, so it's alright. It's not particularly scary, but it attempts to surmise both franchises and lore into the first hour before making a surprisingly logical excuse for the battle to commence. Overall, I really can't recommend this film, but at least it attempted to be a film, which I can appreciate. I have to fault the YouTube version I watched for its not-so-great attempt at subtitle translations, though the point of each conversation wasn't impossible to understand. Though I don't know if I'm actually meant to see anything in this film as it is needlessly dark. I think that's just a streaming thing, it's so dark in this film I couldn't see half of it. It's so dark I couldn't even make out Sadako's hair when she's using it to fight Kayako. This might boil down to badly graded transfer, but I don't really know. Again, the plot of this one's very simple. It's basically, it starts off as a Ring film. The only part of the Grudge stuff is a girl and her family move into the house next door to the Grudge house, which they, find out, oh, it's a cursed house, don't go in it, whatever. She ends up going in it because these kids go in it and the kids vanish, and she's like, I saw those kids yesterday and whatever, and they were obviously lured in by Toshio, and they get killed by Toshio and Kayako, and she goes into the house. It's kind of weird. She goes into the house to, see what the hell's going on, sees Kayako, kind of runs back to her home, and then she ends up, I can't remember if she goes back into it because, and her family tried going in there, and meanwhile, all the stuff of the ring is happening. You get the girls, they're looking for, they've got a teacher who's talking about curses and stuff. They find the cursed tape just randomly in a store. They find it in a VHS player because they need a VHS to record a wedding stuff, like to transfer it into a digital file. So it's like got a good updated version as to why they'd still have a VHS player, whatever. And so they bring it home, they see the tape, they watch the tape, realize it's the cursed tape, show it to the professor. The next day, like, they go back to the place to be like, hey, so we found this cursed tape, but in the meanwhile, the person who worked there had seen the cursed tape and climbed up to the top and fell off and died. And the owners had, like, closed shop because they're like, yeah, no, this girl died here. We have to clean up before we can open again. And they were like, oh, you guys saw the tape? Yeah, she saw the tape too. That shit's real. You don't show it to anyone else. So, of course, they try to, the professor tries to remove the curse from the girl who's cursed. Like, they go and to, like, a shaman or whatever to remove the curse. And it doesn't work because Sadako is too powerful. It kills, like, everyone there in the room, I think, including the professor. And they find out that some other guy finds them and is like, hey, I know about this curse. I also know about the Kayako, like the Kayako curse and the grudge curse. And he's like, I have an idea. And so with him and his assistant, they find a well that I think is like around the corner from the Kayako's house, the grudge house. And they talk to the girl who lives next door because she's gone into that house and has come out and obviously is cursed. And they're like, all right, what we want to do is we want to get you, the cursed girl, to go back into the house and to watch the tape. So they bring this VHS player and everything into the house to watch the tape. So the girl who's been cursed by Sadako and the girl who's been cursed by Kayako are in the house. Kayako is obviously, like, messing with the house to try and, like, scare them, but also is going to come down the stairs and whatever. So while she's coming down the stairs, they're watching the tape, and then Sadako comes out of the TV, and again, it's really black, so she, like, her hair starts grabbing them or whatever. But then Kayako starts attacking her. So they start fighting. And the girls run away to the well because they know that they will just be lured there, I guess. And the girls fight, and you've got, like, this well in the middle. You got, like, Kayako on one side, Sadako on the other, and they go on. The girl who's cursed by both of them is in the middle of the well, and, like, they both jump together, and she jumps into the well, and they follow her down. I'm pretty sure that's how it happens, and they're able to get her out of the well. I can't remember the specifics if she gets out of the well or if she doesn't actually jump down there. She just, like, jumps out of the way and they both fall down and they close them in. Either way, she either gets in there and gets out, or she gets out of the way and they fall into the well. And they close the well off and try to, like, use a charm or whatever to, like, I don't know, they just try to trap them down there. And it backfires because the well opens, like, explodes open, whatever, and the two have now combined into one entity, and then come towards the main characters, and that's the end of the movie. They just end it. Like, it's implied that the main characters die, and then you just see the tape at the end, which I guess has been spread onto the internet and has evolved to include them now as one thing of Sadako and Kayako as one entity. It's not like a two-headed entity. It's basically just Sadako that moves around like Kayako does, but also is spread through the ring curse, like the tape. It's not a great film. It's okay. But yeah. That's my lowest ranked one, simply put. So let's jump into the American Ring films now. And we're back, that's right. It's time for Ring 2, the 100th new movie that I've watched this year. I have a list on my letterbox of new movies I'm watching this year, like that I haven't seen before, and this is number 100 and 101, because I've now watched Ring 2 and Rings. And apparently Ring 2 on Blu-ray is not very easy to get. Because these films both are bad, I'm going to cover the plot of this one really quickly. Academy Award nominee Naomi Watts reprises her role as an investigative reporter Rachel Keller, now determined to start a new life and escape her haunting memories. But when the vengeful Samara returns, Rachel faces a nightmarish life-or-death struggle to save herself and her young son in this edge-of-your-seat thriller. It's not edge-of-your-seat, it's It's slow, it's dull, and it was cheap. I say that because I got it for Christmas. I was able to convince my girlfriend. She was at JB. I have the receipt. That's why I'm emphasizing it. Ring 2 was $11.19. Not awful. Whereas Rings was $4.55. And the 2020 Grudge film was $2.45. Yeah, boy. I say she owed me because we like the price match with what we get each other for gifts, and I think I bought her a book, which was about $50 to $60, and she bought me something. She bought me a bottle. It was a small bottle for a bag that she got me for my birthday, and it hadn't added up price wise. So I was like, "Hey, they got this for sale on JB. How about you check if these free films are there?" Because she was at the place that happened to have the right JB. So anyway, what's The Ring 2? I gave it 2 stars. If it helps, ranking-wise, this is the second last on the list. Like, everything you've seen so far is basically in order. Like, if I was to actually look at the list... ranking-wise, The Ring 2002, Ringu, Ring 0, Ring 2, The Spiral, Sadako vs. Kayako, The Ring 2, as in this one that we're talking about now, and Rings 2017. So, The Ring 2, directed by Hideo Nakata. Geez, that sounds really familiar. It's as if he already did 2 of these movies. And let's see, is this the same as the previous Ring 2? Not completely, but the ending basically is. Instead of doing all this weird sci-fi babble stuff that he did in the original second one, which is honestly a lot more interesting. In this one, he decides, you know what? What if we don't do that? Basically, Rachel and her son have moved to an isolated town, but of course the cold open is a guy watches the tape. He's trying to get this girl to watch it, and she claims that she watches it, but then he's like, but clearly it's Samara's with him, and there's water everywhere. And he's like, wait, did you watch it? And she's like, yes, but then she wasn't actually looking at the tape. She was like, had her hands over her eyes, and then Samara comes out of the TV and kills him. Sure, why not? They really like playing with water in these ones. There's a lot of elements to these films that they emphasize in the second one that comes back in the third one, and honestly, I kind of like that. Some consistency throughout the series. This one doesn't have the same color grading or cinematography as the second one, or even directing style or writing style. I say that despite the same guy wrote all 3 of these movies, as well as like 3 Transformers movies. These... actually, whatever the movies did this guy write, I kind of want to emphasize that. Aaron Kruger, who wrote, I think co-wrote Top Gun Maverick, he wrote Scream 3, which is the worst of the Scream films. He wrote The Ring, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, Transformers Dark of the Moon, and Transformers Age of Extinction, as well as the live-action Ghost in the Shell movie, the Dumbo movie, a Brothers Grimm film, which... okay... And what other one is worth noting? The Skeleton Key. So, and The Ring 2, of course. So, oddly, I've seen most of actually what he's written, surprisingly. The Ring 2. I'm not going to mention most of the plot because realistically, it's basically a ghost possession movie where she finds the tape, destroys it, and Samara's ghost spirit thing is like, hey, fuck you, bitch, I'm going to possess your son. So then she just, possesses the son, and then to save the son, Rachel goes into the TV, into the tape, tries to kill them, even though there's no fucking tape, and Samara drags her into the TV, and drags her down to the bottom of the well, and then Rachel climbs out of the well, closes it on Samara, who's coming up really creepily. Probably my favourite scene in the whole film, because it's a really boring film, but this is a really fun scene. Because, she's, crying up all creepily and whatever. It's exactly like the end of The Ring 2, the Ringu 2. Ring 2? I don't know. The Japanese one. It's the exact same ending, except not as impactful. And she climbs up, she closes it, she finds the cliff that the mother jumped off of, so she jumps off of it, and then suddenly she wakes up. But the funny thing is, and this is where I note the first line of my review, Rachel's sacrifice ending with a Wilhelm scream was a choice. It literally has her jumping off the cliff and you hear a Wilhelm scream. It's bizarre. I didn't want to rewind it because I didn't want to witness that again. So, Take my word for it. Also, the whole film attempting to bring Samara back through sheer will is also a choice. And yes, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is in this. She actually plays the mother of Samara because they have the whole, here's Samara's backstory. Here's the actual mother. We don't know who the father was, and she came by and she was like 8 months pregnant, and then she already had the baby in this like nursing hospital thingy, and the baby didn't cry except for when it was around water. It's as if the baby just knew. Seriously, these movies really emphasize the baby knew that it was gonna die, which is stupid. So she tries to drown the baby, and that is Mary Elizabeth Winstead playing the mother. In the future, present day, the mother's still around, just in a mental institute, and it's played by Sissy Spacek for like one scene, which is funny. She's just kind of there. A lot of faces in this movie, and they're just kind of there, because nobody really does anything in this movie. But Naomi Watts is hot, so I'll give her that, you know. Like, she doesn't underperform, and the kid's still fine. I never got annoyed by him in the first one. Naomi Watts is hot, what can I say? I will make this argument that this is more cohesive than Ringu 2, yet it feels far less necessary or relevant. It feels like an uninspired cash grab with nothing really interesting to say or show, outside of maybe the last 5 minutes of the film, even though that was taken straight out of Ringu 2. So, that's really all I can say about Ringu 2. I wouldn't say it's not worth watching, but if you want a really interesting Ring sequel, I gotta be honest, the Japanese one at least tried to do something different. Yet they both achieved the goal of destroying Samara, but not really, because the American one, she just traps her in the well again. Whereas in the Japanese one, they still trap her in the well, I guess. Yeah, it's the same ending. They obviously couldn't come up with anything, so they just went with the same ending. It's funny. So I figured I'd add a little extra voiceover for the short film called Rings, which is a 2005 film directed by Jonathan Liebsman. It's about 15 to 16 minutes long. I actually found it on YouTube. Surprisingly, it actually comes on the DVD and Blu-ray releases of The Ring, but because my Blu-ray release was from Cinema Cult, it didn't have any special features, which kind of sucks. Nevertheless, you could actually watch it there on HD, which probably would have been pretty cool. But it just basically gaps the two films of The Ring and The Ring 2, and talks about Jake and Emily, I guess? I mean... It's basically the characters that are at the very start of The Ring 2, and how it starts with him trying to show her the tape and whatever, and getting him killed, whatever. But this is the journey that he goes on throughout the 7 days before that, as he's basically part of this underground group who have discovered the tape and who are sharing it between each other and are trying to like test each other, see who can last the right amount of days and whatever to document their experiences. And it's interesting. It's like, you know, the color timing, the editing style, everything about it is very similar to the first The Ring film. Nothing like The Ring 2 at all, which is quite shocking in a way. But it benefits from having this like more unique perspective that like none of the other Ring films do, where they're like trying to experiment with it. But of course, because it's only a 16-minute long film, it can only do so much. And it does have like dated effects and stuff like that, but you know, it's all there for the jump scares and for the surreal horror, that kind of jazz. The interesting part of it is that most people, you look up reviews for this and people are like, this is like so much better than what, you know, The Ring 2 was, or this is what like the start of Rings 2017 was trying to do, but then it tried doing its own thing of, you know, basically doing exactly what the other two films had done. And I basically agree there. This is a better version of, well, yeah, it's a better version of the first 20 minutes of Rings. Like, I would suggest just skipping Rings altogether and watching this flat out, so... But obviously, I'm about to get into Rings as it is. Honestly, yeah, it's not bad. If you have the Blu-ray release or the DVD release of The Ring, I definitely check it out. And it's a good excuse to not have to watch Rings, because this is, it literally, Rings just steals its ideas from this movie, but doesn't do it with as much flavor and directing fun, so, yeah. and it's decently scary as well. So I still only gave it 3 stars because, you know, it's short and its narrative's very disjointed and whatever, but that's kind of also the point. But yeah, I liked it. In terms of my overall rankings for the Ring films, I basically just added it above Sadako vs. Kayako, so between Spiral and Sadako vs. Kayako. So, yeah. Anyway, that's all. Enjoy Rings. Anyway, let's talk about Rings. It's the sound of the police. I don't know. That they have to go say it 3 times. Rings 2017 is a movie. The poster I actually chose because the automatic poster on Letterboxd is like the girl's bare back with a ring on her back, which never happens in the movie. But then they have a full poster which has her butt. It's literally just a half-naked shot of her from behind with a ring on her back. And honestly, I've gone with that one because all the rest of the posters are just Samara coming out of the TV. This is directed by F. Javier Gutierrez. It is a 2017 film. Anyway, I gave this film a 1.5 stars. I guess because it tries something new in a way, but mostly because I liked the first 20 minutes of the film and I didn't like the rest of it. And like, this is the one that has the iconic ads that are like, oh, you know, they're on a plane, a commercial flight, and someone has seen the video, and all of the screens turn on, and it's the video. That's the opening of the movie. And now this is this guy saying to this girl on the passenger flight, they're like, oh yeah, I saw this video, and this is 7 days, and whatever, it's the 7th day, and then he goes to the bathroom or whatever, because his nose starts bleeding, and then the girl's friend sits back down and is like, oh, what was that all about? It's like, yeah, the cute guy next to us, he was saying he watched this cursed tape. And she's like, yeah, no, I've seen that. And then she, like, finds the guy who's in the toilet. She's like, he bangs on the door and he opens it up, and she's like, did you copy the tape and show it to someone? And he's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, oh no, it's been 7 days. So the plane starts kind of nosediving, and all of the screens start staticky and show the video. And then they basically try to escape from the cockpit. The plane nosedives. They start falling down. The guy looks at the door of the cockpit. It opens. A bunch of flies go through. And then you see Samara come out of the tape, and it zooms into the guy's eye, and he dies. That's one of the only interesting parts of the movie. And it happens way too quickly with less effect. And then you only get through expositional dialogue like a minute later that all those people died in a plane crash. So it's like, oh. Like, that's how Johnny Galecki, yeah, that guy, who's a professor, gets the tape, because he just so happens to be at a market for a VHS player, a VCR, and he gets it, and it happens to have the tape, the cursed tape in it, so he watches it. And because he's a professor, he studies it on his students in, like, a secret underground lab at his school, which is very weird. And honestly was interesting. I'm like, damn, this is like a secret underground cult. They're all like studying this thing. But then he makes it seem like only a few of the people there know. So it's like he hasn't shown a bunch of people. He's just showing selective people with a tale for each person. So when that person's about to hit their 7th day, the other person can watch it. Sure, I guess. Cover your ass, whatever. And of course, that's where our main character Rachel comes in, because it's her boyfriend who's gone to this campus. He hasn't been contacting her. She gets a Skype call from this other girl who's got a weird effect on her face. Obviously, she's cursed. And so she's like, you know what? I'm going to go to the school and find my boyfriend. She talks to Galecki. He's like, I don't know who he is. Goodbye. She finds the underground base because her boyfriend had a key in his dorm. And she follows the girl who had called her. And she's like, hey, alright, the girl who called her was like, I gotta show you this thing first, and I'll tell you where your boyfriend is. And of course, she wants to show her the video. She fails because, Rachel, is that even, no, Julia, holy shit. Was I saying Rachel the whole time? That's the girl from the first and second film. Anyway, there is no reference to those films except for the story of Samara, so don't worry about Naomi Watts. She ain't in this one. This is the only interesting part of the film, that's why I'm describing it. Julia gets text on that girl's phone from the boyfriend, and the boyfriend says don't watch the tape, so she goes and locks herself in the bathroom. And of course then it gets to like 7:10, and that's when it's been 7 straight days for this girl, and the laptop starts showing the thingy. She closes the laptop, and then the TV turns on, and she unplugs the TV, then she like rips it off the wall. and then it like lands face first, and it turns on anyway, and Samara like lifts up the screen and starts crawling out. And I actually really like this part because I'm like, this is like the best realization on an American screen for Samara throughout all of these films. Like, the effects looks great. The way they're shooting it, they're like, yeah, we're really emphasizing how good this looks and how creepy this is. And even when she finally like gets to the girl, because like the girl falls over, whatever the crap, much like in the end of the first movie, they zoom up on just one eye. They actually go over the one eye trope, and that's what kills her. And our main character is still in the bathroom, hears all the stuff, hears the girl die, looks through the peephole in the bathroom, and Samara pops up, and then she sees Samara's figure in the window, and then like Samara like opens the door, but then she's like gone, and that's it. That's the most interesting part of the film. The rest of it's really boring. The rest of it's Julia watches the tape. It's a different version that she watches, a slightly larger version that they're like, that's weird, why is it different? And it's got like different imagery only associated to this one particular film for obvious reasons. Basically to be like, hey, go on a wild goose chase and find Samara's bones. And it basically just explains what happened to her mother, how she was kind of kidnapped by a priest played by Vincent D'Onofrio, was assaulted by her, I don't know if she was kidnapped, but he definitely forced her to have a kid that she didn't want to have, and then he's like, oh, wish I had let her kill the child. And so it basically just shows that the mother was imprisoned in a basement under the priest's house, and it was just like a thing. It's meant to be like a twist that it's D'Onofrio, but I'm like, it's clearly fucking D'Onofrio that he's the villain. You know, more of a villain than Samara is because he did all this shit. It's really boring. He's blind. He's forced himself to become blind, so Samara's ability can't kill him. So they obviously pull when the main character realizes what's going on, she goes to the priest's house like, hey, I know what's going on, but like she doesn't really confront him because she doesn't know it's him yet. And she just knows that this is what's happened to her mother. She doesn't realize that the priest was the father who did all this shit. And, of course, they make a Don't Breathe ripoff, which is great. Remember that movie, Don't Breathe, about the girl, the people who break into that guy's house and he's blind, but he's, like, got, like, perfect hearing, and you, like, can find them, so hence Don't Breathe. Yeah, they just do that for, like, 10 minutes, and it sucks. And so, because clearly that had come out like the year before, and they're like, shit, hey, what if we like add this into it? You know, make sure he's blind so we can make it work. And to be honest, the only interesting effect is, if you're blind, can you still be killed by the curse? The weird thing is, we get to like the 7 days thing, and Julia's phone like turns on because she finds the bones of Samara in the guy's fucking walls. Because that's a great place to put bones in your fucking walls. To which, of course, Samara comes out of Julia's phone and kills D'Onofrio. So, like, it cures his blindness just enough for him to realize who it is to be like, Samara! And then she kills him. And then she just vanishes. So she's not even there for Julia, which is really weird. Like, it feels like it's she's there to kill the father, and that's it, which is weird. And then, of course, we get to the final scene where we find out that there was a scar tissue on Julia's hand. It was Braille that read out rebirth. The boyfriend types in the computer, realizes what it is when she's having a shower. She wipes away the steamy air in the bathroom and reveals that she is now possessed by Samara. Wow, how spooky. And at the same time, Samara's using her abilities to get that file that was on the computer on Julia's laptop and send it to everyone in her email thing. So it's not even like a viral video like they try to advertise. I think it actually says it here. Discover the terrifying new chapter in the groundbreaking Ring franchise. When a radical college professor finds a mysterious video rumored to kill viewers 7 days after watching, he enlists his students in a dangerous experiment to uncover the secrets behind the Samara legend. When the deadly video goes viral, they must figure out a way to break the curse and defeat Samara before her evil is unleashed upon the world. But how do you stop her when she's everywhere? That whole second half does not happen in this movie. That's literally the final scene, and she's just emailing it to a bunch of people. And then, like, some people respond, like, immediately, like, oh, what's this video about? Julia, how have you been? Where have you been? And, like, that's it. Then, like, the film just ends when she, like, wipes the mirror and it's like, wow, she's Samara now. That's what it means. It's rebirth. She's Samara now. It's really awful. It's like they clearly wanted to have that be, like, their, like, sequel bait ending. And it's just bad. But the movie's bad, so it doesn't really matter. The alternate ending, which I did watch, has her shower, she sees her hand, whatever. It's actually, like, just after she showered. And she goes over and she wipes away in the mirror, and she's like, just as she's passing here, you can clearly see Samara is now her, and then it cuts to the boyfriend who discovers that it says rebirth, and she comes walking down, drenched in water, down the steps with this kind of staticky effect to her, because obviously she's now part Samara, and, she walks up to just behind him, and he's calling out to her, he's like, hey, I know what that braille means, it means rebirth. And she says, don't look back, because that's a motif throughout the film, where they said at the start of the film, they said in the middle of the film, and then she says it there, and instead of being smart and not looking, he turns around and looks at her, and it zooms in on his eye and he dies. So, she clearly has, like, a consciousness there, but is also possessed, so she's like, she can say, don't look back, as a hint, don't look, or Samara, who's now me, will kill you, but he does anyway. But that's the alternate ending, which clearly was the one that was written in the script, and then they're like, you know what if we do this one where, like, she, like, sends the video everywhere? That would, like, be really cool, and people would want to see another one, right? Because that's how movies work. There is literally nothing else for me to say about this film. It's interesting until Julia watches the digital tape, the science lab students being tested on, that one girl's death. It's all interesting. Then it tries to be too interesting and instead gives us a new version of the tape for Julia alone to witness, which of course leads us on a wild goose chase to find Samara's bones, her real dad, and the explanation for her existence. All of this leading to a bad ripoff of Don't Breathe and a final twist that is just unearned and gives the film a reason to brag about the tape going viral online during the marketing. It doesn't go viral. She emails it to a few people. She doesn't even put it on YouTube. It's just a cheap and lazy film that, despite a curious start, just doesn't follow through. At least the alternate ending stays true to the core of the theme of Don't Look Back, which is something I recommend with this film, and if you were thinking of watching it, just move on and don't look back and you'll be better off. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's... This is so bad. Like, Ring 2 tries. It really does. Like, it's not great, but it tries. But it becomes sloppy and generic. But then Rings is like, what if we have, like, 3 interesting ideas and we just don't do anything good with... Like, the plane is just clearly for the marketing thing. Like, here's a cold open, this will be fun. Because you got to have the cold open with the tape. It's so dumb. Like, it's one of those things where with an idea of a series like this, you're like, clearly, there's got to be something interesting we can do with it. And that interesting thing should basically be, let's just show a different variation of ways people can get cursed and see how they can survive it. Like, that would have been a really interesting film. Like, that's what was kind of set up at the start of this film, which I think was meant to be the idea of the film. And then they go to the point in writing when the main character sees the tape, and then they're suddenly like, you know what? What if she sees a different version of the tape, but she doesn't initially see the different version? She, like, watches the normal version, and then she gets the phone call, and then she has a vision which embeds the thing on her hand, and then suddenly the tape that she now has to copy and send off, it won't copy because this file size is too big, and it turns out it's bigger than the original file, and that's how they find out there are more images in it. Holy shit. And it's just all images that are in this film, and not all of them. there's like a bunch of really cool images, like inside a church with chairs flying and books flying. You get all this really psychic shit that's really cool, and none of it's in the film. All the boring stuff is in the film. The gravestone in the film, the church in the film, the mirror in the film, but like a flooded church, not in the film. Samara in the woods, not in the film. A door in the film, a door in the woods opening, and there's a white light behind coming through it, not in the film. I think that's meant to be like metaphorical or something. Like, oh, this is like she's coming back. I don't fucking know. It's so fucking stupid. I don't recommend it. I recommend the first film and maybe The Ring 2. At least The Ring 2 gives finality to the main story, to Naomi Watts' character's story, to Rachel's story. But it's not great. And it's like they're so long. These movies should be 90 minutes, but they're like almost 2 hours long and they don't deserve it. I know that the first one was almost 2 hours, but that's fine. It was a mystery. It was interesting. This one isn't interesting. It tries to force a mystery that's boring as shit because it's like, I don't give a fuck about Samara's mother. We know about that from the previous movie. And her father couldn't give less of a shit. The fact that he's just a priest who just abused the mother, I don't care. There's nothing interesting in that. That's so boring. What, they just make a demon child for no fucking reason? At least they try. Like, in the first film, they're like, yeah, no, she was adopted and her parents might have been fucking weirdos. At least the second one still doesn't say anything about the father. It gives it open to interpretation. The father could be a demon figure. I guess they took that semi-literally in this film by making it a priest who's a bit of a dick. You know, a bit of a dick, a lot of a dick, but still, a lot. Anyway, it's not worth watching. Except for if you can find that clip on YouTube of the first girl's death and arguably the opening scene, sure, the plane part, but definitely Samara coming out of the TV from the floor. The effects work on that is really cool, and I did like it. That was the only part of the film I really, really liked. Because I think it's the best realization, like I said before, best American realization of Samara coming out of the TV that they've had so far. Like, the end of the first film was still good, but then they showed her whole face and it was bad. But in this one, they showed half of her face and it's good. Hey. Alright, that's all. That was my calm and relaxed talk. Would I recommend any of these films? I'd recommend, obviously, the original Ringu and the American Ring. The Ring 2 is fine from the American version, not Rings. Rings is bad. The Ring 2 it's okay. It's still a 2-star film, but it's fine. Like, if you really need a conclusion, there you go. A bit more backstory, there you go. Any mystery? Not really. The mystery is, why is my kid sick? I don't know. The movie. The Japanese ones, obviously, yeah, the Ringu. Sure, if you want more of a conclusion, go for, like, if you want a good conclusion where it actually ends and they defeat Samara, Ringu 2. Ringu 0, if you really want the backstory that you really don't need, sure, it's a fine film. I like it. I think the last act of it is fun. The rest of it's fine, like interesting drama, but not really anything amazing. It's more or less, what if she's pretty and then she's evil? It's kind of dumb, but that's okay. And Spiral again, if you want to watch the bad ending where the world kind of goes balls up at the end. And that could lead you to technically watching Sadako 3D and Sadako 3D 2. But I don't know if you want to do that to yourself. Up to you. Same as the other Sadako DX or whatever the frag and hoops they called it. Anyway, that's it. Maybe the other one was called Sadako, then it's like Sadako DX. Yeah, because I know there's Sadako 3D and 3D 2. Still. That's all. Thank you for watching. Feel free to check out my Calm and Relax talk about the Jewel and the Grudge series or any other horror playlist. I'll put Jewel up top and the whole playlist down there. And that's it. I'd recommend the Arrow video box set. Really good. If not, just find the steelbook or just the original release of the first film. But get the box set. Why not? It's got some good special features, commentaries, video essays. It's good. The American ones, just get the first one. You don't really need the rest of them unless you can get them in a set on Blu-ray. Then go for it. That's all. See you next time. Adios.